So it's up to me?
No, it's up. I was asking for permission. Are we live from Claudio and Bernarda?
I see that the meeting is on streaming now.
Yes. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first workshop of the Jean Monnet module, Digital Citizenship for European Union. My name is Deborah Barletta, and I'm the Vice President of APICE, which is one of the partner organizations for this project. And I want, first of all, to thank you, the University Roma 3 and the Department of Political Science for hosting this event that was designed to share a little bit what this Jean Monnet module is about, and in particular, one of the areas that this module is covering. And it's my pleasure to moderate this small panel and this small movement with the hope that all the people watching us now will get interested in this module and, we'll have the chance to find out more when there is going to be the next repetitions of this course. So I hope that you will enjoy this time together in this Monday morning. And I have the pleasure to introduce you the speakers of today. And before doing so, I will start with, I think, the symbolic host of today's event, which is the first speaker of today, who is the Professor Raffaele Torino, who is the coordinator of this Jean Monnet module and is full professor of comparative law at the University of Roma 3. So good morning, Professor Torino. And I will now interrupt my share screen and, the floor is yours. And welcome again, everyone.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for this short introduction. And again, good morning, everyone. I am very happy that we can start today the first workshop of our Jean Monnet module that, as you said, is titled Digital Citizenship for EU. And we are very happy to analyze as first topic of this first workshop the contrast to the hate speech. Of course, I am more than happy. I'm very honored to have these two distinguished guests as MENNO ETTEMA of the Council of Europe. Thank you, Dr. ETTEMA, and of your participation to our workshop, and Dottoressa Nelly GISHYAN, Dr. Nelly GISHYAN from International No Hate Speech Network. I have to say that this is my first workshop first online workshop with my dear students of this Jean Monnet module, and I'm very curious how it will work, of course. And I am more than happy that APICE is assisting us in this workshop. And I saw a lot of preparation for this, and I think that it will be a success. As Deborah said, I am the coordinator of this module, this Jean Monnet module, that I am providing to our students of Roma 3 University with two very nice colleagues, Professoressa CRISTIANA CARLETTI, who is going to give the conclusion today, and Professor Luca Germano, who will hold the third section of our module, because our module is split in three parts. My part that I manage with Claudio Di Maio, Cristiana Carletti part, who managed this with Simone Coutura, who is here, and by Professor Luca Germano, the third part with Claudia Mariotti. I would really not to consume the time that we have for this workshop, and so I give back the word and the floor to Deborah, and thank you again and good luck.
Thank you very much, Professor Torino, to give the official welcoming to this part of the Jean Monnet module. But as we said, we're going to be very respectful of people's time, so I will very fast going on with our first speaker of today. Professor Torino has already shortly introduced him. His name is MENNO ETTEMA. Is from the Council of Europe, in particular from the No Hate Speech and Cooperation Program Manager and from the Inclusion and Anti-Discrimination Department. So, MENNO, good morning and welcome again. I will now stop my sharing screen and the floor is yours.
Good morning, Deborah. Thank you for inviting me, distinguished other speakers. And good morning, everyone in Italy and probably across the globe, because this, I understood, is on Facebook Live as well. As I was introduced, I work for the Council of Europe and specifically in the Anti-Discrimination Department. For those who do not know, the Council of Europe is an intergovernmental organization consisting of 47 member states. So it crosses, it brings together all European countries, let's say 47 in total, from Iceland all the way to Russia. And it's mandated to secure the implementation of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. And it does so in working with member states to uphold these standards and to secure their deliverable in the member states. It does so through standard setting. So the Council of Europe has three major roles to fulfill. One is standard setting, to actually further develop and specify how the human rights standards construed in the European Convention on Human Rights are practically applicated and further delineated how they apply. Then, of course, monitoring to see how member states fare in securing and upholding human rights for those on the territories. And we work with the member states through cooperation programs. Just a little bit more about the standard setting. So I'll go through all the three levels of the Council of Europe's work. When it comes to standard setting, of course, the starting point is the European Convention on Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, which is the base of all the work with our member states in securing them. In addition to that, there's additional conventions being signed up by the member states. And in the context of hate speech, which is today's topic, I would like to highlight the Cybercrime Convention as one of the examples, also known as the Budapest Convention. In particular, the additional protocol, which stipulates what member states could and should do to address racist and xenophobic material that is distributed through computer systems. Later on, when we have a more interactive discussion, we can further elaborate on the potentials of such a convention. These are binding conventions. These conventions are binding. So the Cybercrime Convention is one, but there's many others. And then you have what we call soft law, which are recommendations, Committee of Ministers recommendations. So these are recommendations that the national governments sign up to uphold and implement. And in this line of when we talk about hate speech, there's a few recommendations, Committee of Ministers recommendations worthwhile to explore. For example, on the Committee of Ministers recommendation from 2018/3 on the roles and responsibilities of internet intermediaries, which we can discuss a little bit more about later. And for example, also the Committee of Ministers recommendation from 2019/1, which is on sexism and which addresses, for example, sexist hate speech. There is a recommendation on hate speech from 1997/20. But I think the important point here is that the Council of Europe continuously elaborates new standards and soft law instruments. And I am also responsible for the co-secretariat that is drafting a new Committee of Ministers recommendation on combating hate speech that is ongoing at the moment. And its aim is to give guidance to the member states on how to address hate speech through legislative measures, so criminal, civil, and administrative law, but also through non-legal means, for example, education, awareness raising, use of counter speech, co- and self-regulatory mechanisms. And this is what we would stand for as a comprehensive approach. And this is really what the Council of Europe stands for. We do not need only law, but we need a comprehensive approach, bringing all the different steps that you can take to address hate speech together at national and at European level. So I hope that very much that the new Committee of Ministers recommendation that we are working on is guiding the member states in upholding human rights when they are addressing hate speech, including in the online environment. This is about standard setting, which is ongoing, and we can discuss this a little bit more today after my presentation. The second pillar, of course, is monitoring. I think it's very important to work with the member states to assess how they are faring in the application of these standards. In regards of hate speech, of course, the European case law is European Courts of Human Rights case law is very important. It gives very important guidance on how to implement these standards. But there's also, I want to mention here, ECRI, the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance, which year after year has documented hate speech on the rise in European countries. And what I want to highlight here is the specific groups that are in a vulnerable situation, that are the targets of hate speech, which tend to be traditionally already groups in vulnerable situations. And then, of course, I refer to Roma and travelers, LGBTI persons, refugees, but also national minorities, to name a few. Plus, when there's an intersectionality of grounds, for example, a female Roma person or a female journalist are specifically targeted. I think one of the findings as well, which is worrying, is the fact that many persons in vulnerable situations do not know their rights, and there's an underreporting. And I think this is one of the concerns that we have, is that we need to up the game when it comes to reporting, because once we know the magnitude of the problem and how it looks like, it's also because easier to address it through policy and practice by the member states and all the different actors that go with this. And this comes to my last pillar, which is cooperation, which is the last avenue that the Council of Europe works on, cooperation with the member states. This is also my second task within the Council of Europe. I work a lot on cooperation projects on hate speech. And it goes from the comprehensive approach understanding. So, for example, one of the projects that we do is what we call a systemic design mapping of the national approach to hate speech, which basically means we bring all the stakeholders that are one way or another working on hate speech, for example, NGOs that are working with victims, the law enforcement, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Interior, the judiciary, media actors. We bring them together and to actually see, okay, if I'm a victim of hate speech, how do I go into the cycle? Who do I in touch with first? Who guides me further? Do I have redress at the end? Is there a solution, or am I lost in the chain of actors? And how does one interact with the other? So this is really a comprehensive, systemic, what we say, systemic analysis of the national situation on addressing hate speech. Following such a mapping, we would work with different stakeholders on capacity building, for example, so training, education, with the law enforcement, with the judiciary, for example, so that judges and prosecutors know how to address a hate speech case, but also NGOs. How do we give effective victim support, or how do we do public awareness raising without actually igniting or further strengthening the hate speech narratives that are going around? One specific project that I would like to mention in this regard, which I think is for this audience very interesting, is the We Can for Human Rights Speech project. It's a 2-year project. We're in the 2nd year this year, and it aims to build research-based tools. So we've done research last year, and this year we're building tools, online tools, to 3 tools in total. One is to actually analyze a hate speech situation, to actually use for certain indicators. So we have a checklist, and you use they are indicators to check if a hate situation might spiral into a more a more extensive hate speech action, and what kind of action you should take. Should you ignore it? Should you use counter speech to tackle it, or should we report it to law enforcement because it's clearly illegal and dangerous? And once you've identified that, the next step is, okay, if we go for counter speech, how do we do that? You can't just say, well, I hate you and you're racist, because you're only putting more oil on the flames, let's say. So how do you develop a human rights based? How do you communicate human rights, which means an understanding for the rights of others, empathy, critical thinking. And so we have a second tool consists of checklists and questionnaires and little exercises to develop a human rights narrative. And once you have the narrative, of course, the question is, how do you pack this into a message, and how do you spread this message so that other people pick it up through the social media platforms? So the third tool is how to build a communication strategies with very concrete suggestions and tips, how to use online tools to strengthen your message, to identify your target audiences, and to make sure that it reaches them. So this is one of those practical tools that we're rolling out. and it's built on the No Hate Speech Movement youth campaign, which was a Council of Europe campaign that started in 2012 and has set up national campaigns that are campaigning and raising awareness on hate speech and how that poses a risk for human rights for everyone. And they've already developed several educational manuals, and we are now bringing that a step further and moving them online. I'll stop here, and I look forward to the further exchanges later this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Menno. And I would like to stress in how much it is nice to have in a workshop dealing with hate speech, somebody representing Council of Europe, which is an institution that for so long now have taken like the step forward in contrasting hate speech, and not only, as Menno was mentioning very rightly, through recommendations and policies, you know, and by talking with governments, but also with all the other actors that the stakeholders that are involved in the contrasting of hate speech at different level. And the fact that we are here hosted by university, so we have also the academic kind of field that is very important. But you also mentioned the No Hate Speech movement, the NGO field, and this introduced our next speaker, because another important aspect of contrasting hate speech is for sure the activist one. So we are trying to give to our audience also a little bit of taste, because again, we are giving small pills of the different ways of dealing with hate speech. So we have another small pill by another distinguished guest, which comes from the activist field. So it's my pleasure to introduce a fellow activist, which is Nelly GISHYAN, who is currently the chair of the International No Hate Speech Network. So welcome, Nelly. Good morning. And the floor is now yours.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? First of all, just to double check it. Yeah, okay, perfect. I feel like Menno directly sent the arrow in a right way. It's for me just to start already from where Menno stopped, because where I am going to start exactly from this point, which is like what this No Hate Speech movement was about and what is the perspective of young activists on this. So as a starting point, I just take this and continue from the No Hate Speech movement, because you see here my pin and Deborah's pin, it's all related with the No Hate Speech movement logo. And you see my background, it's also based somehow from what we get as a legacy from the No Hate Speech movement. No Hate Speech movement was youth-led campaign, which is a campaign of the Council of Europe, was and is a campaign of Council of Europe. And it was established by young people, basically, and very much supported from Council of Europe from then and now. And what we do within the campaign, how it's structured, just to introduce to you the very brief the structure, how it functioned. We had the campaign coordinators in all member states of Council of Europe, or almost all of them. And how the cooperation went, it went through different activities, like through different youth initiatives, through different educational activities, awareness raising campaigns and events, and different flash mobs. And nowadays, for many people, living and working online is something very new. But for all of us as young activists of the campaign, it was way of we lived in the last 8 years, let's say so. So many things were happening online, and this is how we consider that this youth campaign was one of the biggest campaigns, because it could cover many countries through this kind of online activism. And of course, it's not only online. Nowadays, we say online and offline, but this term we used to use for such a long time. So we did this kind of initiative, activist, and within the No Hate Speech movement, why it became so popular and big, it was because in many countries and in many regions, we established many other organizations. So within one movement, we established many other networks, many other organizations, which were very much specific to a certain region. Like, for example, in Caucasus area, we established ECON for Turkey, Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and similar countries that are somehow involved to different initiatives. And in Western Balkans, there is another organization which was specifically for that region. So just for you to understand that this movement was not only based on what campaign coordinators would do, but also within the international team of people who were involved into the campaign. And also just to make the clear overview that how wide it could be. In all the countries, we had also activists And these activists were somehow part of the national campaign coordination, or they could be individual activists. So this was another possibility for young people to be involved through the certain structure or just by themselves, just because they were active, because they were human rights activists. So the possibilities and variety on this was quite big, and it was covering many aspects on human rights education. And as Menno mentioned, there were some good manuals, and there are some good manuals and still will be, we do hope. And these manuals were kind of key value, or key added value of what we used to do, and we still continue. We continue human rights education based on these very good manuals. Of course, we will put soon on the chat so that later on it stays for you as a resource in case you want to continue. And those are bookmarks, Compass, Compassito, and Weekend, the one that Menno mentioned. So those are very much important because wherever you work in the field, you need to always consider that the combating hate speech goes through human rights education, and human rights language is the key important understanding, that we combat hate speech only through the human rights language. As again, kind of quoting Menno today already several times, but again, we do not want to fuel hate through hate. It's always need to be clear for all of us, people who work on the field. So, and what is this No Hate Speech Network about? Basically, No Hate Speech Network was established because the campaign was over. How it happened, here we have several activists and campaign coordinators from the No Hate Speech movement. After, when it was finished, many of us were like looking each other, thinking how we are going to live after all. We so much used to work together, kind of live together in a way. So how we can stop our activism? Unfortunately, hate speech is never-ending story. We cannot just let it go like that. And we decided that, of course, we are going to continue working together, and all these networks and organizations that were established during the No Hate Speech movement campaign joined to this initiative, and we established No Hate Speech Network. So when we say like this is a very strong network with experienced people inside, sometimes people can think, okay, this is only 1.5 years old network. How come you can have this kind of variety of experienced people like individual activists and also organizations? This is our key important emphasized moment that you need to really know, that those are the people mostly who came from the No Hate Speech movement, already experienced activists and NGOs. And yeah, we are very much proud of this, of course. What I would like also to highlight about this is like, it's very much open to new people. We always keep the fresh flow, and we always want to involve new young people and organizations, and this is what we are very much looking for through similar activities, for you to know that there is a platform where you can have your say, and this is a platform that raises the voice of those in need. And of course, human rights activists for us is always on 24 hours and /7, and we never stop doing the job that we do. We truly believe on what we do, and if you are like-minded people, you are more than welcome to join us. We are very happy to involve new people. And last question, what I would kindly ask you, I know that you prepared some question probably for us, but I also want to ask you something. Maybe you know also similar initiatives that today they are not here, but would be nice to highlight them also. So let's raise also the voice of those who we supposed to do, let's say, to speak on behalf of them, and just put maybe on the comment side those initiatives or like organizations who are like working on the field of human rights and doing similar initiatives. So try to highlight them as much as you can, so that at the end of the day, when this live stream is over and the information stays on internet as a platform, many people, when they look for similar activities, initiative or support, they know where to find. So this is my call, kind of question to you, and even if you want a challenge. So let's do so, and thank you very much, Apice and Roma University for this great initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nelly. It was a great pleasure to hear you and Menno, and I hope that some people from our audience kind of collect your challenge. And maybe it's time now for me to repeat that this is just the first part, of the workshop, meaning that to highlight the fact that to actively contrast hate speech, we need to be involved, to participate. We want to have a moment of sharing, also for people outside this particular Jean Monnet model, from which, you know, this workshop is just a part of, with the hope that people would get much greater interest in this topic and in ways of, you know, actively participating in dealing with it. Because, you know, you don't need to be a full-time activist or, you know, representative of the Council of Europe, but we really need the participation and involvement of everyone. And I very much stress the fact that we really, really need questions coming from people, you know, who see this topic and want to do something about it, because, you know, it's through questions, interaction, participation that we can kind of improve the work in contrasting hate speech. So I don't know, I'm asking my fellow teammates if there are any questions from the comment sections on Facebook. And in the meanwhile, I know that people are copy pasting all the interesting links that are coming from MENNO and NELLI that are about the manual produced by the campaign. So we're sharing them also through Facebook. So also people outside the Zoom room on which the workshop is going on, we have the chance to go and consult them. They're totally free source and available in English and in French for downloading from the Council of Europe website. So if you know, the team tell me there are no further questions, I would, you know, I can consider close this panel, this like first part of our workshop. I don't know if there are other contributions coming now, but, you know, I really want to invite people following now to get in touch with the Department of Political Science at University Roma 3 to know more about this Jean Monnet module. On, you know, and all the different parts that compose it, because this is going on for other 2 years, so there is a chance to enroll in it for the upcoming 2 years. And there are 2 questions from Professor Carletti, which we'll know later on. But, you know, please, Professor Carletti, I can, you know, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Deborah, and apologize me for coming in a very short time. But all the interventions have suggested me to, if I may, pose 2 questions to MENNO and to NELLI. And thank you very much since the beginning for your very interesting contributions. The first is related to the operational interrelation among the international organizations, especially in the Europe continent, dealing with the issue of the hate speech. So this is to, in particular, refer to MENNO. I would like to know, MENNO, if there are within the Council of Europe activities, and I suppose so, with the new committee, ad hoc committee for dealing with the artificial intelligence topic, the CAHI. So what do you think about it? Because I know that the CAHI is managing something in the documents that for sure encompasses the issue of the hate speech and hate crimes, both offline, but for sure as far as CAHI online. So this is my first question. And then there are some very interesting opportunities to work together. So I know that for sure the Council of Europe works together with other international organizations. And here, as far as hate speech, I would like to refer for sure to the European Union, but at the same time to the ACE that works also in this context. For NELLI, I would like to know if there are experiences as far as the kind of interaction that the no hate speech movement deals with specific beneficiaries of the activities you are working upon. I would like to refer about differences in respect of the audience. There are differences if you enter into contact with the public opinion, and in particular the young generations, but there are very big differences if the opportunities to enter into contact refer to police forces, or, as MENNO said, the judiciary, that should be taken into account, in particular as far as the investigation procedures, but also trying to sensitize the judiciary or the police offices as far as the hate speech activities. So if you could tell us more about some experiences with different kind of audiences to approach them by the No Hate Speech movement. I stop here and I thank you since now for your replies to my questions.
Thank you very much for that question, and very good. I didn't started talking about AI as artificial intelligence and specifically algorithmic decision-making programs, which have a huge impact on how information is filtered in the online space and what information you are, or what kind of expressions you are exposed to. But this is, of course, part of the discussions that we're having. So the new Committee of Ministers recommendation on combating hate speech makes references to this issue. However, in the main text, there will not be a lot of references to this issue, but in the explanatory memorandum that comes with it, there will be more deliberations because it's very much connected to human rights impact assessments that need to be done when it comes to these systems, human in the loop when it comes to these kind of systems, or human moderation in decision making when it comes to decisions of the takedown of speech, because that's, I think, one of the areas where it's important. So there's two angles to this discussion. One is the algorithmics feeding you information, so you can be exposed to more hateful content or not, depending on your previous behavior in online searches and stuff like that, and what you looked at. And the second, of course, is when it comes to assessment of materials by the companies, and they use a lot of automation systems, and is there an overview of what they do and how they take that down? Because there's not only a concern of taking down illegal hate speech, because it falls under criminal law or civil and administrative law, it should be taken down, and companies have an important role to adhere and implement these regulations, not implement in the form of making decisions. They're not a judiciary body, but once the decisions are made or where the guidelines are very clear, they should implement them. But in doing so, they should not overreach and therefore limit freedom of expression. It's always this balancing. And I think when it comes to hate speech, there's an element of context, sarcasm, for example. There's all kinds of other aspects in speech that make it very difficult for automatic systems to detect and make a decision. So yes, and we know that there's a framework, the CAHAI, the ad hoc committee, is wanting to work towards a framework convention where there will be sub tools or sub legal measures underneath, or recommendations or sub conventions. And one of the efforts that we are doing as the anti-discrimination department is diving into AI and discrimination, and hate speech is part of that discussion, but also hate crime in the online space, prioritization of or the impact of AI on access to services, etc., etc. So there's a lot of elements here where existing discrimination plays out in the online space and these systems. The second question was about the cooperation between international and European institutions. Yes, I mean, we are working very closely with OSCE and the European Union, but also the UN agencies overall. I mean, what's very interesting is, for example, in the EU, the European Union is the Digital Services Act, which I think will give quite some new guidelines for the platforms on how to regulate the online space. And their line of thinking is very much in line with our line of thinking, but of course we need to keep on being in touch, where the Council of Europe's primary starting point, of course, is human rights. So upholding human rights principles and how to do that practically in the online space as also offline. So that dialogue starts from two different starting points, I think, with the same intent of upholding human rights. And we see that the European Union has referred to case law and also European Council of Europe recommendation. So the recommendation on internet intermediaries from 2018 has been referred to several times in the Digital Services Act, as also other recommendations. So that's an ongoing discussion. We are working with that. Of course, I am personally also part of the Code of Conduct, this other EU initiative on working with the internet platforms on takedown of illegal hate speech. And at the same time, the Council of Europe has its own dialogue platform with the internet platforms So we are also in direct discussions and cooperation on standard setting work, for example, and monitoring at the same time. OSCE, it's basically the same story. I think what is interesting with the OSCE, but also with the Fundamental Rights Agency, for example, is the monitoring work. Fundamental Rights Agency has these surveys, which are very interesting, which gives data on existence of hate speech and who it affects and how it affects them. OSCE, of course, does not necessarily address hate speech because it has the American partnership and Article 1 of the US. But of course, hate speech and hate crime often interconnect, and you see that lots that hate speech is part of or consists at a certain level to hate crime, and it's also anchored in such a way in the criminal law. And therefore, there's a lot of cooperation on untangling these two concepts, and at the same time understanding where they overlap, where hate speech is actually a hate crime, and then to do the necessary monitoring, because both the OSCE and the Council of Europe finds data gathering very important, and working with member states to improve this and streamline the process. But we also have very concrete cooperation. That comes to the third element, actually, is your third question, which Nelly will answer in a minute. But the Council of Europe works a lot in the field practically with the OSCE, for example. So we have a manual on policing hate crime based on sexual orientation, gender identity. And here we work together with OSCE that has its own training program on hate crime. So there's interlinking here, and we work together to deliver one training course instead of two separate ones. But we've also worked, for example, with law enforcement in North Macedonia. We've trained law enforcement on addressing hate crime and hate speech. And of course, one did one, the other one did the other. And the funny note here is, for example, in that training with law enforcement services, we used the We Can manual. The Bookmarks manual. So the Bookmarks manual, which is on addressing hate speech through human rights education, was written for young people. But in practice, it's very useful for all age groups. And for example, we've also used it with law enforcement in North Macedonia, but also in a few other countries. We have used this manual to train law enforcement, judiciary in some cases as well. So we are working on this, yes.
Thank you very much, Menno, for a very comprehensive answer. But, as we said, this is kind of just a small sneak peek on all the complex things that, come when we talk about hate speech. So I give the floor to Nelly to answer the question. She can kindly do that in 2 minutes, so we can go to the next part of this workshop. And thank you again very, very much, Menno and Professor Carletti, for the question. So Nelly, floor is now yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cristina. Thank you very much also for the question. I will just try to.
Sorry, Nelly, I can hear you a little bit low. Can you start again? Maybe now it's better.
Now? Is it better? Yeah? Okay.
Okay.
How is it now? Is it better?
Yeah, it's better. Thank you.
Okay, I will try to speak up. Thank you very much. I will just try to cover the main part that is related to the network. This is educational aspect. So what network does, it is a network with lots of organizations and individuals inside. So there are organizations that are directly dealing with the victim support. They are dealing with some law-related topics. They are supporting us also in this regard. But network as itself is kind of combining all this variety of organizations in one. And of course, what we want to focus mainly is education, rather than going to specifically to victim support or to jurisdiction, etc. But maybe in the future we will be much, much bigger and stronger so that we can cover. But on many things, of course, we rely on what Council of Europe already does. And we learn from these good practices. We take all these good practices as implementing part already. So we do not double do some jobs, because there are also good organizations that it's better to cooperate with those that already exist and they have these capacities to do similar activities, or the question that mostly your question would apply to them. And with this cooperation and networking with them, we try to be stronger together, not to do the double job, but trying to involve all the stakeholders working in the field and being stronger together. This is the main idea behind. What I would like to highlight about the very specific feature about network and No Hate Speech Movement and No Hate Speech Network is like No Hate Speech Movement mostly was about involving Council of Europe member states. It was European, even though at the end there were like Morocco joining, Tunisia joining, and some other countries that at that moment they are not Council of Europe member states, like Canada, for example. There was a campaign coordination in Canada, in Quebec, and this was becoming wider and wider. So there was a demand to continue this activity. And when it comes to the No Hate Speech network is international one. So we do not only go through Europe to European values and only European standards, but also going beyond. So trying to cover all the world. Let's see how we can cover all these things. But currently we are involving lots of organizations from Africa also, so that we really do believe that human rights is human rights for every human being, and it should always be done for everyone and with everyone together. When it comes to what are the specific features that when we mention education, we really need to highlight that this is not only formal education, non-formal education, but within the non-formal education, I want to highlight one of the, for example, specific features that we took from the No Hate Speech movement, when we still continue, and it works very well. It's like having action days. And during those action days, what we are doing through involving different people from all the world, let's say, we are trying to involve them and raise awareness on these special days, which are related with human rights. And for example, the upcoming action day is about World Day for Safety and Health at Work, and it's 28th of April. So those international days are highlighted by young people raising their voice, involving other young people. So it kind of goes with domino effect, you know, trying to engage each other all the time. And this really works quite well. And for example, we are trying to adapt related to the upcoming challenges. And for example, COVID-19 shows that there are other challenges that we, humanity, didn't foresee, but currently we are facing new discrimination. We are facing new types of kind of hate speeches towards each other, and all these things we are trying to be faster and trying to involve young people and use the resource of young people who, let's be honest, sometimes are generators of hate speech, at least online, even not being aware of what they are doing. So through this kind of human rights activities, we are trying to shape and rebuild these activities into a constructive dimension by putting them already on this responsible side, try to be the one who is combating hate speech, not generating. So through the youth work, through human rights-based youth work, we are going to involve young people into this responsible field. So if those people who are watching currently this live stream would like to join also to be part of the upcoming action day, you are more than welcome. You can contact us later on, because currently this live stream is also shared on the No Hate Speech platform, and just write us a message. We will really reply you back and we'll involve you into our activism. So be part of those who are really standing for human rights, rather on the other side. That side is not interesting. So
thank you very, very much, Nelly. Thank you also for this invitation to join the No Hate Speech Network. And, you know, again, you can have further information about all the things mentioned by getting in touch with Avici, of course, but also with the University of Roma 3. And we really hope to see people that, you know, want to know more about it and, you know, maybe enroll for this course next year and year after that. So, but now it's the time to dedicate, you know, the time to participants and students who are already part of this workshop, and to go to dig in the relationship between defending human rights and contrasting hate speech. So we now need to say bye to the people following us on the live stream on Facebook, and again, please get in touch with us to know more, and we hope you enjoy this you know, a little bit less than an hour together to start your Monday morning. And please get in touch with us, enjoy the rest of the day, and hopefully see you soon. Okay, so thank you very much and see you.